In this video, we will go over how to interpret a graph with two independent variables. You were just asked to interpret a graph of the effects of learning condition and retention interval on performance on the final recall test from Study 1. Since we have two independent variables, we are interested in the main effect of each independent variable. The main effect is the effect of each independent variable on the dependent variable when you ignore the other independent variable. In this experiment, we are interested in the effect of retention interval on recall performance when you ignore learning condition, and the effect of learning condition on recall performance when you ignore retention interval. We are also interested in how each independent variable influences the relationship between the other independent variable and the dependent variable. This is called an interaction. In this experiment, we are interested in the effect of retention interval on the relationship between learning condition and recall performance, as well as the effect of learning condition on the relationship between retention interval and recall performance. We can get a sense of the main effects and interactions in this experiment by looking at the graph. Let's start by looking at the main effect of retention interval. Does recall performance differ by retention interval? Looking at the graph, we can see that both conditions decline in recall performance over time, so it looks like recall performance does differ by retention interval. In other words, there is a main effect of retention interval. Next, let's look at the main effect of learning condition. Does recall performance differ by learning condition? Looking at the graph, we can see that there is a difference between the learning conditions at each retention interval, so it looks like recall performance does differ by learning condition. In other words, there is a main effect of learning condition. Next, let's consider the interactions. Does the difference between learning conditions change depending on the retention interval? Looking at the graph, we can see that the size of the difference between the learning conditions is different based on the retention interval. For example, the difference between learning conditions after a 5-minute interval is small and favors the study condition. In contrast, after 1 week, the difference between learning conditions is large and favors the study test condition. It looks like the effect of learning condition on recall performance reverses over time, meaning that there is an interaction between learning condition and retention interval. Lastly, does the difference between retention intervals change depending on the learning condition? From the graph, we can also see that the study condition has a steeper decline in recall performance over time than the study test condition, so it looks like the difference between retention intervals does change depending on the learning condition. This lends further support for an interaction between learning condition and retention interval. When we have an interaction, the main effect of each variable becomes less important. Statistical tests confirm that the interaction between retention interval and learning condition is significant. Specifically, the effect of learning condition on recall performance does reverse over time. Participants who read the passages twice remembered more after a 5-minute interval, but participants who read and then took a practice test on the passages remembered more after a 2-day and 1-week interval.